Hi, I'm Barb.
Hi, I'm Pat.
Pat and I have a lot of interesting conversations.
Yes, and we thought you might like to listen in to our podcast that we've called Coffee House Inspirations.
We hope you will enjoy our topics.
Hi, Barb.
Hi, Pat.
So today, after much discussion, we've decided that we're going to examine anxiety a little bit because we're obviously living in a time right now where there is a lot of anxiety amongst families and individuals and groups. And although there is, and of course, I'm talking about the pandemic, and although there is an end in sight regarding, the vaccinations and such, it's still a ways down the road. Wouldn't you think we're still looking maybe at, for the general population, at maybe August or September?
Oh, for sure, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've still got a ways to go. And lives have changed so much, individuals and families and kids at home and kids in school and in situations of what's happening in the, in the health industry and what hospitals and care homes are dealing with, and how people have lost their ability to kind of move about in the world as they would normally do. And out of that, I think, comes a lot of anxiety, and it's like, what is my world going to be like? What am I going to be able to do and not do? And something begins to happen in our bodies,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because when we start feeling the stress, the brain starts to produce a certain kind of chemical mix, through the cortisol and the adrenal and all that sort of thing, a certain kind of chemical mix to get us ready for something, to handle the stress, because to the body it feels like something is attacking us,
Yes.
that either we're going to have to fight something, we're going to have to flee from something, or we're going to freeze in our tracks. Ugh, and not be
Mm-hmm.
able to
Mm-hmm.
move. And as that happens, the body continues to produce this chemical mix, kind of driven by the way the brain perceives what's happening inside of our bodies, our fear. They think, oh, something must be happening. Let's get ready for the cocktail and let's get all that stuff flowing through the body.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have nothing to release the stress. So instead of being able to, go and punch a, COVID-19 virus, you just and you can't physically run from it. So you do all those things that sometimes cause more stress than others. And sometimes it's people that are, if you're in a home with the same group of people for a long period of time, and things you can usually do to alleviate some stress you don't have anymore. And so this cocktail builds in the body. And as it builds and we can't release it, our stress levels begin to rise. And often the result of that is a pretty high level of anxiety, because
Mm-hmm.
we're living in a state, a physical state, where we need to release the hormones to rebalance ourselves, but we really have nothing to do that with it, that we can think of. Some people are going,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a great one, all that sort of thing. So I think that, because we've all had an experience of this, I thought that maybe you would be willing to tell us a little bit about what happened when you had your heart surgery.
Okay. Okay. Well, interesting enough, when I kind of looked to see, I wanted to know kind of like what exactly happens in the brain when this happens. So it usually starts with a trigger, and the trigger can either be an actual threat, like a physical threat, or a perceived threat. So you don't have to have a tiger charging you. You can just have it going on in your head. If you're thinking that something is wrong, whatever, that can charge it. That start it. And so it's the amygdala in the brain, which is at the base there. That's what gets that's what gets triggered. And it's called a amygdala hijack. And you're right about all of those hormones and stuff. So the amygdala actually gets those hormones going so that you're ready for the fight or the flight. And in the meantime, what happens, it hijacks the frontal lobes. And so the frontal lobes they're the part of your brain that does all of the thinking, the reasoning, all that kind of stuff. And so when it's high, oh yeah.
So you're saying that when it's hijacked, then the perception of how that is seen is no longer seen through the logic of your brain.
That's right.
Okay.
Because now you're in the primitive, part of your brain, which is the limbic system. So now you're in the primitive part of your brain, and that primitive part of your brain is telling you that you have to either fight now or you have to get the hell out of here. And so it needs everything in your body to start reacting to that. Your heart rate increases, your eyes dilate, your breathing gets more shallow. All of these physical things are now happening to prepare you. So after my heart surgery, I'm of course concentrating on the health of my heart more and thinking about it a lot. And so since then, so that was just about 3 years ago, I've probably been to the hospital about maybe 6 times with situations where I thought that I was having some kind of a heart issue. And every time I have gone and they've tested me and everything, everything's fine. Everything's fine. So what's going on with me? What's happening where I feel like I could be having a heart attack? I could be, on the verge of dying. Like, what's going on? So I've come to the conclusion, with myself and other professionals and stuff, that I'm having anxiety. I'm having anxiety over the health of my heart. And so, but it feels like, so this is what it feels like. Your heart is just pounding. Your heart is pounding. You're breathing. You can get shaky. You can have extra bowel movements. You can, and then as these things are happening, of course, it's just reinforcing in your brain that something dangerous is happening, and which just reinforces it. And so it's just it's just like a snowball that just keeps going.
Okay, so then you said this happened like 5 or 6 times, and so back to
over the last few years, yes.
Yeah, so back to your point about the brain shutting down, and I understand that because your body is totally in preparation for responding to this perceived threat, whatever it might be. And so there is a physical shutdown in this, frontal brain lobe. And so you're saying that even after the 4th or 5th time, you still couldn't activate that brain function, that it was still overridden by the anxiety.
Well, it seemed like I could, like, after I kind of realized what was going on. And, I did a course on CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy. And I was practicing breathing and meditation. And so I really felt like I was getting it under control. And then sometimes there didn't even seem to be a trigger. I mean, there was a couple times I'd be sitting here just calm, quiet, watching TV, journaling, whatever. And it would start. And that's one of the reasons why I thought it was something else, because nothing triggered it. Nothing seemed to trigger the anxiety. And so that's when I got really confused about it. So I thought, oh, well, this really must be a heart issue. And again, it was not. So it lives. So this anxiety must live in your cells, and it could be from years and years and years
Yeah.
that is accumulating,
Yeah.
that has been accumulating.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, because it's a powerful cocktail. And when there isn't a release, when you can't, release all of that from your system through your bloodstream,
Mhm.
then it accumulates. And so you may have like half a cup of this cocktail that sort of sits in reserve, because anxiety, especially when you've had a major kind of health event like you did, that sort of sits at about a half a cup. And then somebody might say something to you that was a bit frightening as a comment, as like, say, oh, Barb, you're really lucky you lived through that, hey? And then you go, oh my God, I almost died. And then this half cup goes to 3/4 a cup, and you still haven't done anything. And you're sitting with 3/4 of a cup of this cocktail, and it releases into the bloodstream.
Mhm.
And voila, an anxiety attack. And
So it's not,
so go ahead.
so it's not necessarily about the heart, but the heart is now a reason to be anxious. It's kind of giving you like you said, like an outlet.
Yeah, and for especially for heart issues, the symptoms of anxiety mimic a heart issue.
Yes.
We've heard this hundreds of times. I had a friend whose older brother would show up at the hospital multiple times thinking he was having a heart attack, and because the symptoms are mimic, short of breath, palpitations, kind of a episodic chest pain, lightheadedness, all of the things that are attributed to heart events, and they are also symptoms of high anxiety and an anxiety attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so that little cocktail of hormones that exist through the that are spun off every time something is activated in us, if we aren't emptying the cup, and we need some of that in our body all of the time, but if we're not emptying the cup of that excess, it just builds up from where it was last left.
Yes.
And then it gets to spill stage, and you start getting these symptoms. When I was very young in university, I had my very first anxiety attack. Had no idea what it was. I was afraid to tell anybody about it because I thought I might just be crazy. There might be something so wrong with me that I can't come back from this. And up until the time that I got some help, it ruled my life, because you don't know when they'll hit you. You don't really know what they are. And your anxiety level is now the cup just gets filling up with, the possibility of all these things. And then the spillover happens.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's never a rational thing, because like you say, by that time your brain is shut down and you're just reacting out of fear.
Yes. Well,
so I'm just
no,
curious. What was your evolution in that? How did you come to, because it seems to me you've got pretty good control of that now.
well, it has taken a couple of years, and like you were with me that one time, and you saw how I was reacting, and all we were doing was walking in the mall. And all of a sudden I started to have, those sensations. And by the time you got me home, because I couldn't even drive, we were ready to phone an ambulance. So, I mean, and so that's what I mean about them coming out of the blue. So it's not about the heart. So that's not what it is. But because I've had heart surgery, now those things that have been sitting in my body, they've been there probably most of my life. They now have there's now, in my mind, there's a reason now for them to really express themselves, I guess.
Yeah.
But so what I've learned over the last couple of years is to maintain a practice of awareness of what's happening in your body, of breathing techniques, meditation, cognitive behavioral therapy, all of those things, if you do them on a regular basis, will help you when and if an attack comes. Because if you can get the frontal lobes to kind of take over before the amygdala or the fight or flight center hijacks it, if you can get control of it, then you have a better chance of bringing that anxiety under control. But if it gets hijacked first and it shuts down the frontal lobes, then you're in that fight and flight mode, and it's harder to get yourself calmed down again.
Well, and that's because, and I think because there's two parts of the system. One is the part that prepares us to fight, and that's where all the chemicals cocktails are being produced. And then there's the other side that balances it out, because they're called this sympathetic and parasympathetic systems of the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're depleting your body of oxygen because you're breathing so darn fast and your muscles are so tight and you're just like in a state, the other side of that is to really understand what deep breathing means, so that you are replenishing your oxygen supply as best you can in the response to this anxiety. And then the other piece of it is because all our muscles are just like wound up tight because we're so frightened and expecting the worst, that we have to learn how to get those muscles released. Because you've done this, progressive muscle relaxation, and where you're teaching your body again how to relax, because in that anxiety state, it's so far from being able to relax that you may as well forget about it.
Yes.
So you have to take over with something that can allow your body to relax.
Yes.
And what you're talking about with the meditation, half of that is just is slowing your mind down enough so it stops sending those signals, those fear signals, because it's part of that whole same loop, isn't it?
Yes. And if you do that on a regular basis, if you're consistent with that and like maybe have a daily practice, then you have a good chance of kind of staving off the attacks to begin with. So so that you're not in the midst of one, trying to practice those things. So you're not in the middle of an anxiety attack, trying to breathe to calm down, trying to relax. If you can kind of stop it from happening in the first place, or lower the chances of it by doing a regular practice, that will help.
Yeah, I think that lowering the chances is a big deal, because you're not constantly, like you said, maybe not constantly staving it off, but your cocktail, the cup of where your cocktail is starting to empty out.
Yes.
And so that it takes more, and takes a lot more kind of issues happening or events happening to fill that up to the point where it pops over. So your resources are allowing you much more resilience.
Yes. Yeah. So and then when and if it does happen, you're much more aware. You're aware of the sensations in your body. You're aware of what's going on. And again, you can there's a better chance of you to reason your way out of it rather than fight or flight your way out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really that's where you get control of the brain again.
You get control of the brain again. That's right. Yeah.
Well, and there's other things too, like nature is a wonderful way to reconnect your body to something else as well. And you love walking, and we've got such great places around here, when it's in the summer, in particular, or spring, fall, the water, the rivers, the beautiful paths, the seasonal changes and all that stuff. Those are all very healing aspects, aren't they?
Yes. Yes.
Because
Yeah. Walk.
you can start out feeling kind of tense and a little bit, unsettled, and walk for a half an hour and come back feeling pretty
Yeah.
relaxed. And part of that is I think the connection to nature, where you actually can have that, that environment that slows your thinking pattern down a little bit too.
Yeah. And I think probably also if you have built up energy, like when I was doing the cardio rehab after my surgery, one of the things that I would do a couple times a week is go down to the sports center and do walking. And there was nurses there and stuff, and they check your blood pressure and all of that kind of stuff. So it was this one day that I went, my blood pressure was quite high. Again, kind of on the verge of, anxiety. And so instead of suggesting that I just sit there and maybe relax, they said, well, why don't you go out and walk and get rid of some of that excess energy? Because a lot of times, instead of making your blood pressure go up more, it will help to bring it down, because you're getting rid of energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another way. So walking is a really good way of doing that.
Yeah, or it's not just being in nature. Sometimes it's just, when it was still warm enough in COVID, and we'd sit in our, socially distanced chairs in the park. That was, very relaxing.
Yes, yeah, it was.
To be where the birds are and watch little animals and have your feet on the ground, in the grass and that sort of thing. It just kind of brings a certain kind of peacefulness to a situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think have that little chipmunk try to drop an acorn on your head.
So I think that it's a very prevalent I think situation. I don't call it I call it not a disorder so much as just a fact of life, that that anxiety can take over so quickly if you're not, number one, like you say, if you're not aware of it, and if you haven't developed some skills that are physiologically and research proven to reduce your cortisol and adrenaline levels. Mm-hmm. So they're not that difficult. They're just a practice that, like you say, that you have to develop over time, and to really know that you just might need it, and not in a fearful way, but just say, this is something that I know for certain can really address some of my anxiety issues.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, when I was in university, and for me, it was finding resources that, first of all, explained what the heck it was, because I had no idea. And then getting some resources to manage it was huge for me. And then being able to talk to somebody about it. That was, there was a period of time where I didn't want to tell anybody, because I didn't really know what was going on. And I was fearful about that too. So, these resources are so important just for everyday living. Every once in a while something comes along, and you either have a burst of anger about something, which actually does the same thing to your body as anxiety does, because it's still a fight response.
Yes.
And you know how many times you say really stupid things when you're really angry, so your brain shuts down.
Well, exactly. That's exactly right, because there's a lot of times that after an attack, and after this has happened, people will feel regret or embarrassment, or because of the way that they've behaved. But it's because they weren't thinking rationally. And it's like on TV when you see people that, if they're afraid and they're trying to get into their car, or they're trying to get into their house, and they're dropping their keys and they can't get it in, and you as somebody that's watching this is going, come on, just put the key in there. And but you can't, because you're in survival mode, and you're not thinking clearly.
Yeah. Well,
you just want to get away.
Yeah, I like that word, because we've talked about that word, and it's a loaded word.
What's that?
Survival mode. Yeah. Because you almost have to get the sense of what that means, because there's a part of the body and the response and what's happened with the mind and some of those sort of newer reasoning brain functions closing down, you are in survival. And it might not seem that way, but for the body, it's like we are in trouble here.
Yeah. Well,
And
it's like, yeah, it's like that. It's like that perceived danger. Like in this day and age, we don't have as many, like physical threats like we may have had back in the day when it was, like, being attacked by animals and stuff. But because of the news, because of social media, we are connected to like all over the world, and there is so much going on, and so that builds your anxiety, and so a perceived threat will do the same thing, because your brain doesn't know the difference between an actual threat and a perceived threat, and it'll react the same way.
And say that again, because that is so darn important.
The brain doesn't actually know if it's an actual physical threat or a perceived threat. It will react in the same way.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so we would probably be winding this down. What do you think has been the most helpful for you in developing resources or building your own resilience or feeling a little bit more confident in your, in the way you can manage your own anxiety?
Well, probably one of the biggest things that has helped me is probably you.
Oh.
because you have an understanding of it, because you've experienced it yourself, and because you're someone to talk to. So like you said, to be able to talk to somebody about it. Like, I don't have a therapist. My therapist is you. And my sister, but you understand it, and you've given me a lot of information. You practice meditation and you teach it. So I've watched your videos. I've taken CBT classes. I've done some YouTube videos, for like breathing, meditation, and just the awareness. Just being aware is huge. And the fact that I've had to go to the hospital a few times because of this and everything. So the more times I go, the more times I realize when it happens again, okay, I know what this is now. This is what I need to do to calm myself down and to help myself. So I guess just having information, having someone to talk to, being aware.
Yes. And also I think watching you, the fact that you've practiced it,
mm-hmm.
you've done the work, you've learned what deep breathing means for you, and you've learned what muscle, because when our muscles are tight, things aren't working right.
No. Yeah. Yeah. And how about you?
Well, I think for me, it has been my crazy busy mind. And I have a very, I don't know, it's probably not much more active than anybody else, but I can get myself in such a pickle in such a short period of time with this brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I have really developed, a meditation practice. But I also like to be outside, because I find that nature is so calming and it has so much balance in it that you
Yes.
can't but not sort of feel some of that. And every little thing that you do is going to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you say, the awareness is numero uno. What is going on here?
Yeah. And yeah.
Always look at our deficits instead of what we can do.
Yes. And I think awareness is key, because it really helps you to be able to reason your way through it. Instead of letting that survival part of your brain take over. So if you can kind of catch it before you get into that mode, you have a better chance of thinking it through.
Yes. And you also, I think at the same time, with the resources that you've built up, you kind of have like a little toolbox.
Exactly.
You open the toolbox and say, okay, I'm gonna do this might do a little readjustment here and such, and that, and having the experience of and the practice of those things that are in the toolbox are really amazingly important things.
Yeah, and if you have one of those little, one of those little airline bottles of booze in your little toolbox too, you can just, take a little swig of that. That might help initially. And then you can work your way through the rest of the toolbox.
Well, that's a good place to end this, don't you think? Well, that was,
yeah, okay.
I love these talks because they remind me that that we're really okay. And
Yes,
friends are important, and being able to talk about these things is so important. And I
It
feel
is.
very blessed about that too. So
yes.
so we'll check in next time.
Okay, it was great talking.
It was excellent.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.